All right, folks, good morning. My name's Pete Irvin, one of the volunteer managers of the Resource Advisor Cohort, and I'd like to welcome you to this month's April 15th, 2026 Cohort Topic Call. We do have some folks missing today because there's a fire archaeology training course going on right now in Elko, Nevada. So some of our normal voices may not be with us today, but we're excited to have a great topic this morning. Helpful digital tools and mobile applications for resource advisors on incident. And as an old dinosaur who's more comfortable with grease pencils and sharpies and old quad maps than with field maps and Avenza, I'm looking forward to the call. Before we get to our topic, a couple of announcements. And if I'm a little scattered this morning, it's because I just spent an hour listening to the U.S. Forest Service chief on NPR's 1A program talking about the phase one, I guess, of the current U.S. Forest Service reorganization. A fascinating discussion that if you didn't catch it, you may want to look on NPR for that recording. He was joined by the head of the Forest Service Retirees Association, by a representative from the Council of Concerned Scientists, and an FFE representative for a pretty frank hour-long discussion. Hey, another note is that if you haven't seen them yet, the official 2026 National Fire Year themes are out from NIFC. And that's the predominant audience there is PIOs, but I do want to make sure to mention one of the themes is clarifying suppression approach and strengthening public trust and operational reporting. And the bullet points under that theme are that there are two types of fire: prescribed fire and wildfires. And there are two clear types of suppression strategies: direct extinguishment and indirect confinement. So a little bit different terminology that a whole bunch of folks spend a whole lot of time coming up with, and one phraseology that we'll hear more of as fire season progresses: direct extinguishment and indirect confinement. And Jen, would you like to mention what you talked about pre-call?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. There is some transition guidance out for the Wildland Fire Service, which is moving ahead. So that's the consolidation of the Department of Interior bureaus, primarily Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, and Bureau of Indian Affairs, where those fire programs are getting consolidated into the U.S. Wildland Fire Service. So some guidance just came out. They outline leaders' intent and priorities, and it's imperative that this transition in no way impedes the department's wildland fire mission. So they're making it clear for the post-fire world, we are still standing up. The U.S. Wildland Fire Service will stand up the Department of Interior Bear Team. So it will be now the Wildland Fire Service Bear Team, and there will be support for resource advisors. The resource advisor program will be stood up by the bureaus. So the individual agencies will still maintain resource advisors. Resource advisors will be called up as needed based on a home unit's needs for reads. So I can share this. Hopefully I can post it in the chat and you guys can all read it. There, we do have some meetings this week, and I have some questions for clarification. This is just transitional guidance. So the one thing I'm wondering is, I know a lot of us, my career has been a militia, like a resource person in a park unit where I depend on the FMO for PPE, like in my fire shelter, my helmet, training. So that's a question I have. We have a meeting on Friday of how the Wildland Fire Service is going to continue to support home unit needs, the militia that helps out at the home unit with wildland fire incidents. So there's still a lot to be worked out, but I will try to post this in the chat, or if you want a copy of this transitional guidance, I can, hopefully there's a link somewhere I could post that in the chat too. So there's a lot going on, and probably my big take-home message that I can only like the most is that there's a lot of change occurring right now in the org chart, and I anticipate a lot more change as we move into the summer and into FY27. That's all I got, Pete.
Great, thanks, Jen. And Brian, I see your post in the chat. You want to emphasize that?
Sorry, I just came out of the field and put a food in my mouth. Give me a second here.
Perfect, perfect. Breakfast time.
No, I'm East Coaster. It's 11:30 over here.
Go ahead when you're ready, Brian.
Yeah, just want to give everybody heads up. I know there's still a lot of lingering questions with M280, M9042, REAF, and the other positions. 310-1, the federal supplement. Had a meeting with some folks from NWCG, and we are jointly creating a document that deals with the majority of the questions I've been getting. I appreciate them coming, but we're waiting to answer some of the questions we're getting once this document comes out, because then it's not little pieces of information getting spread around through the resource advisor community. It's the one unified voice. So please just be a little bit patient. Field season has kicked off major for me. I'm a biologist in my day job. So this is the first I've sat in front of a computer this week. So we got a little bit of refining to do, but please just be a little bit patient.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. And when Brian's not out in the field, folks, he is the current chair of the NWCG Resource Advisor Subcommittee. So, Brian, appreciate that, and sorry to interrupt lunch. Hey, with that, folks, we'll move to our main topic today. Helpful digital tools and mobile apps for resource advisors on incident. And we've got two great presenters, and I'm happy to kick it over to Theo SHAHEEN-MCCONNELL. Theo, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and take it away, sir. Still on mute, Theo.
Classic. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, like you said, my name's Theo SHAHEEN-MCCONNELL. I've been an archaeologist and a REAF on fires since 2020. I'm an AD out of the Mendocino. And I think I'll just get started here. I'm going to turn my camera off and start presenting. Share. Window. Share. All right, can you all see this?
I got you. Yep, you're good right now, Theo.
Copy. All right, thanks. So yeah, here's the title. Go over some of the contents. I'll just give a brief introduction, and we'll talk a little bit about data management, because often, that data security and information sharing is a pretty big topic on incidents. I'll talk a little bit about 3D modeling tools, including photogrammetry, some 360-degree imagery options, and then I'll kick it over to Molly for the next presentation. So I initially started thinking about new ways to capture information and data from fires. Obviously, we all know that can have huge impacts. We're going to have that with fire, but for the actions that we put into place on the ground, you know, they can drastically change the landscape. And we also end up in places that oftentimes have not, you know, been inventoried or surveyed in the past. And when those two, when the impacts, you know, combine with unsurveyed areas, you know, it's we have a pretty big responsibility to record what was done there, but also provide information about what is there in the first place. And going through the steps, learning, you know, what it takes to be a READ and a REAF, and interacting with ops and planning and folks at the ICP and an IMTs, you know, it's complex, lots of complex processes we go through, and we have to decide the best ways to do it every day. So that being said, I found it helpful to like break it down, you know, for everything that we're assigned to do, you know, what is it that we're doing? You know, who relies on that information? Because different people and different departments, you know, have different ways of understanding information and data. And who is there, who we're talking to should inform what it is we're doing, which is what's needed to achieve the goal. If that is, you know, a photo, we need to show someone where a site is, or we need to flag a boundary of, you know, a plant population that needs to be avoided during dozer line construction. You know, we're gonna employ different methodologies depending on what we're doing out there. And I'm a lifelong learner. I think it's really important. I mean, I've discovered over my career, right, that as much as we or people that we work with, groups we work with, think, you know, there's a set way of doing things, there's always room for improvement. And that is what led me kind of into this digital world. And then, of course, reporting and delivering what we see out there is huge. So how can we create new reports that may communicate what we saw and what we did and what the other collaborators did out there? So why do we want to adopt emerging tech? You know, in some cases, 2D photos, you know, they're affected by subjective interpretation, so they're not quite as objective as we may feel. Often, we've discovered that engaging with content in immersive digital environments, you know, it helps people who go to those places have a better understanding of them once they get there for the first time. So the idea here is that it will reduce the amount of the familiarization time that it takes for operators if you're not able to be out there with a hand crew when they're going through, you know, a sensitive site. If they've seen a digital representation of that site before they get there, they're have a more well, like I said, positive experience, but they have a better idea of what to do when they're there. Also, I mean, I know on fires we collect a lot of data. Lots of people are still going through data from past fires years ago. That being said, there is an opportunity to collect more impactful data, especially for the future, because our capabilities are changing rapidly now, and even if we're collecting data that we don't have the opportunity or the capacity to utilize right now, in the future, the data may be used in ways that we don't know. And also there's the interest, the excitement we can capitalize on behind new technology, where things look cool, changes the way that the subject is thought about, and that can inspire stakeholders to provide more information or provide direction, or outline priorities that they have for resource protection or management. Same with operators. Of course, here's a disclaimer for data management, data security. We always want to follow incident guidance, home unit guidance, home agency policies and approvals. You want to confirm with the higher ups, what data they're okay with collecting, in what situation, and the best way to handle that. Some apps have a lot of data collection that is not always clear. A little hot tip here is when you're using your phones and other apps, always collect data in airplane mode. It helps just mitigate some of that. But of course, always ensure your data handling procedures align with incident and agency expectations. That being said, certain tools can be more useful for a task at hand. If you're engaging with tribal partners, if you're trying to explain where a site is, or where exactly to go to heavy equipment operators, and also for PIO support, you can create engaging content that will be different depending on who you're talking to. And also, if a site's going to be destroyed, sometimes that, we see that out there, right? Sometimes you might want to collect as much data you can. We're talking about like pictograph sites. If there's not clear direction that they shouldn't be photographed, it might be worthwhile to create an immersive record of that. If the fire is going to come through, it might burn hot right there. And then some resources, of course, can be less stringent. We're talking about public trails, roads, talking about roadsides. If a trail is being improved, these are things that some data management can be maybe broadened a little bit. And the applications I'm going to talk about moving forward are for information only. They're not officially endorsed. But these are options you can consider and think about, and then do your own research and work with your agencies and home units when you're on incident to see if they can be adopted. So 3D modeling, here's a little bit explainer, right? You can use iPhone and iPad Pro models from 12 forward, have integrated LiDAR scanners. Some Samsung phones had them in the past as well, but not currently. Anyway, they send out lasers and record how long it takes for them to hit something that's physical and return. And from that data, it creates a 3D model like you see in video games of whatever it is you're recording. Now, lots of these mobile apps can process the data on device and generate, visualizations without having to go to the cloud. So it's possible to make sure that the models are just as secure as a photo you take on your phone, And then you can even export them to different types of formats to then show or view on desktop, show other research managers or other collaborators as needed to explain whatever's going on in your situation. There's a few on the desktop. There's a few different options, but Blender and Cloud Compare are both open source and free and offline. So it should be pretty good. The app that I use for 3D modeling mostly is called Scaniverse. It's made by Niantic, who produced Pokemon Go. If you know what that a mobile game is. It's pretty simple. It works completely offline. You need to select that option. There's an option also to like upload your models to the cloud, but as long as you select keep it offline, it won't do that. It works pretty well and it's very easy. You just pull it up and you hit record, and you can see in picture 1 everywhere those red lines are, it hasn't captured data. So you just move it to that. You just move your camera to point in those areas, and then it'll pop up like what you see in the lower bit of the image. And then if you hit this range button, you can adjust the range between 0.5 meters and something like 5 or 10 meters. So you can capture more, a wider area at the same time. Of course, the further the range, slightly lower detail. The data processing, and then once you collect the data, you can choose you process it right away. There's like a low, medium, and high setting, and this is what it looks like. And then within that 3D model, you can see, let's say this was a dozer, that cut through a hill slope or something. You can quantify impact at that exact spot within the app or within an app on the desktop like Cloud Compare. I find this takes marginally longer than just taking photos, and sometimes even less time if you add taking manual measurements in the field at the same time as the photos, because you can take measurements in within the model itself. So you get a lot more data for the same amount of energy, effort expenditure, pretty much. I find the biggest areas I've collected, are maybe 20 by 20 meters, and that's kind of big for Scaniverse. There's another app, 3D Scanner app, which I haven't used, but apparently works a bit better. For Android, you need a more powerful Android phone. I have a mid-level one that I play around with, and it wasn't able to do this. It uses a slightly different technology called photogrammetry. So you're going to want to test that beforehand, before you end up in the field, especially when you're offline, to make sure it works. Photogrammetry is another way of making 3D models by combining a lot of photos. Thanks to Fran McCormick for connecting me with Zach Day. I think Fran's on the call here. Zach is a BLM archaeologist from Bakersfield who has used photogrammetry extensively. And he's got a DOI approved software called AgiSoft Metashape. And as well as a high performance computer, because a lot of the processing on the computer takes quite a bit of effort, hardware effort. And he's had a lot of success working with tribal partners to record archaeology sites, and has offered to support anyone here on the call with learning a little bit more about this process, and even processing images that you take for photogrammetry. Sorry, for the record, I can't see my presentation notes, so I think I'm missing some things. But for photogrammetry, what you're going to want to do when you're in the field, you're going to want to take images of a site. Let's say this camp the fire ring at the top there and those trees, you're going to want to take continuous images of the area or the feature that you want to capture, whether it's the ring or a trail or you know, a large tree or whatever it is. You're going to want to overlap those images by 30 to more preferably 60%. So you're capturing 60% of the image that you just previously took, so that there's a lot of overlap, because then what the software does is it stitches it all together and creates this 3D model. He's offered to help anyone out, like I said, so let me know and I'll connect you guys. After that, I've also been using 360-degree imagery for a while. This is most commonly used in real estate, but there's a lot of other, you know, opportunities, and I've found it pretty effective on fire. Users can look completely around in an image as if they were standing there. On the cell phone, there's a web app that works on the phone that was developed by Stanford. Unfortunately, you need to be online for that. But you can also, same thing with photogrammetry, sort of similar to photogrammetry, you can stand in the same place and take photos and stitch it in an app, such as BMO Stitch. You can then use a couple different desktop softwares to create, to augment your image with data. Here's an example from a fire where we were visualizing a parking, how we're going to turn this into a parking lot. So the idea is those red orbs are where boulders can be, and we were able to communicate more effectively to the home unit leadership, you know, what we were recommending. If you wanted to invest in a purpose-made tool, action cameras, GoPros, and Insta360s are they're getting cheaper, and you can do everything offline with them because they come with their own software. So this is slightly more streamlined to use these tools. You know, you can just hit record and walk around and then extract screenshots from the videos. Of course, there's the extra cost involved, but you can attach selfie sticks to those to get extra angles. Like in this case, I'm staying on truck, and the stick I was using is three feet or so further for more of an aerial view. You can it almost looks like you can buy sticks that are much longer too, and it looks like you're using a drone, but you're not using a drone. It just looks that way. A couple basic tips and tricks. When you're using some tech, you know, it's rebooting is really helpful. If something's not working, try to reboot the app or device. Go a long way. You can try to open and log into apps when you're online first before you go out in the field. Make sure something's working, and then you can test it, like I said earlier, in airplane mode to make sure it works before you're out in the field. And then don't worry about perfection, right? When we're out there, something oftentimes is better than nothing, and you don't need it doesn't need to be perfect. These tools can be impactful, even if they're glitchy. So some potential uses, you know, for landscape impacts, you can record an area before and after a dozer or handline goes through, and then compare those models to show what the impacts were. You can actually like quantify amount of soil moved and that kind of thing if you're looking at 3D models. Providing these different types of visualizations can impact, you know, community and collaborators differently than, you know, your classic photos and documents and reports. And like I kind of touched on earlier, the especially with the 3D data, you know, more data become more useful in the future, and you don't want to overburden, you know, the home unit with data. But if when you're on an incident, if they're into this, that's something you're able to provide more value in the future. Of course, stay safe while you're out there. There's lots of tools, lots of options. So see what you like, see what the incident, home unit, and your agency like. And the biggest part of this is communicating. You know, you're communicating information to create better outcomes. So communicate, communicate, communicate. And some references. That's it. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Theo. And folks, active chat right now, and that's always encouraged. Lots of good information flow going on there. I will reiterate, in case folks can't see the chat, that today's presentation is being recorded and will be up on the READ Cohort YouTube channel in a few days once we have a chance to do some cleaning up and editing dead space out. And it will also be, the presentations will be in the Google Drive library of the READ Cohort. With that, and thanks again, Theo, let's go to Molly.
Hello, can you hear me?
Got you.
Okay, great. I'm Molly Ray. I'm an archaeologist and I've been working on fires since 2017 and kind of gone full on season since 2020 as an AD. But my background is mostly in the Southwest, working for the National Park Service at various parks and a little bit with the Forest Service. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay.
Yeah, it's still in process, Molly. Got it in the presenter view.
Okay. Let me go to. All right.
It's up
Do you
now.
have it now?
Looking good. Yep.
Okay, great. Can
You
you
bet.
see
Thanks.
my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, because I couldn't find the laser pointer, but okay. So here's my presentation. I'm gonna go through just some helpful apps. Many of you probably already know a lot of these, but yeah, just gonna toss out a couple of them. I like to use Canva for presentations, and I was inspired by this one about French history and Napoleon. So I put some tablets and iPhones in his hands. Okay, so let's go forward. So yeah, first I'm gonna just talk about some apps that are kind of fun to use. They're not really critical, but you can get some extra information from them. Some photography apps that I like to use, the good old Avenza and field maps, and then finally some methodologies for use. And I'm going to try to make it kind of quick in about 10 minutes or so that we leave time for questions at the end. So I might kind of move through these. So this one, a lot of people probably already know. It's just a good way to kind of get a bird's eye view of what is happening nationally. It's called Watch Duty, and you can tap on the different fire icons and then get the acreage, containment level. It's just a good way to track fire perimeters, evacuation orders, and even air quality. There's a lot of useful information in here, and I think most people use it nowadays to just see what's happening on the national scene. And then this was a good lightning tracker. Both of these are free, and both. I'm not sure if lightning tracker works on Android, but Watch Duty does work with both Android and iOS. So yeah, the lightning tracker is just kind of a cool tool to use if a storm is coming in and you want to see maybe there's going to be new starts in a certain area or areas to avoid. Yeah, there's good layers for lightning strikes, radar, and some alerts. These are kind of fun ones to use. Like I said before, these are just kind of supplemental for extra information. It's not the basic ones that you would go to, but I find a lot of people use these more and more on fires. So we've got Onyx Hunt. It's, you know, it's used for a lot of hunters to get good maps, and it's actually a good one for looking at old roads. And then has really good aerial imagery. Actually, it's one of the best I've seen. It is expensive. It's $100 annually for the national map. Otherwise, you can just pay for like one state at a time. We've got TrailForks, which is mostly for mountain biking. It does have good trail layers, and it's $54 annually. And then Gaia GPS, I use this one a lot in my personal hiking, and it has good IR layers and active fires. So that's a cool layer that I've seen a lot of like hotshots use. And that one's $60 annually. And just a disclaimer, like these apps are probably ones that you're going to use on your personal phone, because I don't think the government will be paying for these, you know, additional apps on your government devices. But like I said before, many of these are already used by folks in their personal lives. So it's kind of just things that you might be looking at just to reference information. It's not like you're going to be collecting data on these apps. And yeah, they're typically just used in your personal life and then in addition to the fire. But I think if you're not collecting data on these, then perhaps they wouldn't be foiable, because that's the cautionary tale that people say, don't use your personal device on fires because it could be FOIA'd if there's a FOIA request. Maybe someone in the chat can answer that, like if you're, because everyone has your personal device, you know, on a phone, but if you're not using it to collect data, perhaps it wouldn't be foiable. So anyway, that's just a disclaimer for that. And then here's a tip for getting TrailForks and Gaia. I don't work for Outside Magazine, but I love them. And if you do an Outside Plus subscription, it's $90 annually, and you get access to all these mapping apps, and also get to see the online content for Outside Magazine. Okay, so moving on to the photo apps. So my favorite is Context Cam. Someone a few years ago showed me this app. It's just these are the type of photo apps that you can have timestamps on, and like the georeferenced information overlaid. And then there's this middle one, Theodolite, and then timestamp. I think that one is used for Android, whereas Context Cam and Theodolite I think are just iOS. So they don't have Android capabilities. So here's an example of a photo I took in Context Cam, and I just really like it. I used to use Theodolite, but I like this. It's a cleaner image, and I really like it for doing quick photos of maybe a damaged archaeological site, because it's really important when you're taking overview photos for damage assessments to know the direction of the photo. And it's, you know, when you have to do like a paper photo log and get your compass out and your bearing, that takes time. And so this is a quicker way to just have all that information embedded on top of the image. And you have your UTMs and the date. So yeah, I really like this one. And it does cost $6 annually, but I think it's worth it for me. And what I try to do also is I try not to take too many photos. Like Theo said, you don't want to like overload the local unit with too many photos, but I use it for site assessments, and then I'll do a photo log for that. And then if I'm taking like a before and after of like a repair, for instance, I will make a photo log for that. But if I'm turning in just REAF photos for the local unit, I try not to have more than 30 or so for my entire role, because they're not going to have time to look at all those photos. But yeah, this is what I use. I used to embed photos in Avenza, but it's just too tedious to extract them. And I find that if you do a photo log, then it's kind of easier for the local unit. So yeah, here's the OG apps, Avenza and Field Maps. Avenza, it's better for general navigation. If you're using field maps and you zoom out, it's going to be really cluttered with all the symbology. So if you get a good like transportation map, it's a better way to zoom out and look at the whole fire and maybe communicate with the division soup with that type of map. And it's commonly used for viewing and collecting sensitive data. There are a lot of kind of quirks with it that I'll talk about in a few slides down the road. But it's still heavily used for archaeologists on fires and other botanists and fields where you have to view and collect sensitive data. And then field maps, of course, is what we use to collect the operational data. And that's mostly going to be conducted by the field observers. So the FOBs and division supervisors are the ones that are supposed to be collecting that data. But sometimes the SITL, the situation unit leader, they will talk to the resource advisor coordinator and allow us to collect that data while we're out there, because a lot of times, you know, we're going over the same lines, but you want to get that approval first before you start collecting data in field maps like the dozer lines and hand lines, etc. And then I just wanted to go over the maps that you can get in Avenza, and this is probably a refresher for a lot of people, but a good way to actually pull up these maps on your phone is scanning the QR code, but you have to be there in person to do that. So I always pull up the FTP site before I go to a fire, and I at least get a few maps on my phone before I get there, like a transportation map and maybe just an ops map. So yeah, they use the data that's collected in field maps, and the GIS will upload daily maps to the FTP site, and these maps can be downloaded in Avenza. And they make a variety of maps every day, and these are, you know, used by the fire crews. So here's the website for it, but I'll talk a little bit more about accessing that. So I don't know if I should play this. I did like a screen grab of me walking through it. I guess I could do it live right now, but here I'm just typing in FTP incident specific data, and then you'll click on that and you'll have all the different states and regions. So I clicked on California North, and then you have all the different years. And this isn't an archive. Oh yeah, and also CAL FIRE, watch out for that when you're in California, because whether it starts on California or private land or public, it's going to determine which folder it's in. But then I'm going to the GIS folder and then products, and this is where you'll find the georeference PDFs, and they make them every day. Like you can see all the files here. And then I'm clicking on the 22nd. And then they have like PIO maps, operational maps, evacuation maps, repair maps, transportation maps. Oh, and the ARCH, I used to say, like, why do they call it ARC? But it's architectural. So it's just showing what architectural scale the map is in. So yeah, here's just an example of those maps, and you can download them. So going forward. So here again is the file path. So when I went to the FTP site, incident specific data, I went to California North, 25 incidents, and then I went to the green fire, GIS, products, and then the date, and then all the maps that are available. So this is a good tool to use. You're not going to be downloading these every day because you have field maps to see that like refreshment of the data that's getting collected. But I love maps, so I like to kind of go heavy with my maps on Avenza, and so that's how you get them. Also, it's good to know how to get the INVA maps. So those are the motor vehicle use maps. Every forest will have them, and it's a good reference tool for, especially during suppression repair, because then you can see the legend of which roads are official or not. And then you just go to the Discover tool in Avenza to find those, and you can just type in INVA in whatever forest you're on and use them. So here I just have an example of how I make a bunch of folders so that I don't have a lot of loose maps everywhere. So you can make folders and what's called collections, and I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I like to have a lot of maps, but you want to be careful not to collect data in all these maps because it can get messy pretty quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the methodologies for using these apps the best way that I found. And with field maps, they have what's called a mobile map package, and it's something that can be set to expire and is side-loaded to devices, so it's not on cloud storage. And you see this commonly used, and it's better to have these pre-made for a forest so that as reads arrive, you can distribute it. It's not too hard to make, but there's a few road bumps that you might find, and you have to acquire the data that you want to see. But the benefit to the field maps for viewing sensitive data is you can tap on the arc sites and points and polygons, and you can access the attribute data. So you can see the site number, which is really important, and the site type, which you can't easily do in Avenza. And then you're able to toggle layers, and you can even overlay incident data, which is really helpful because a lot of times we're just referencing lots of different maps to see if sites are impacted, or if you're lucky and have a GISS, then you can like run buffers to see if sites intersect with the incident features. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go a little fast here. Okay, some problems with Avenza are viewing all the sites at once. Like I said, if it's a big area, you need to have all the sites labeled, and it's hard to do that in a static map with a georeference PDF. And then it gets tedious with exporting the layers if you don't label them, because if you just keep making layers and layers and don't label them, they're just going to be called layers and you'll get confused. So I'm just, yeah, like I said, I'm gonna move fast through this, but I'll give you some references to kind of dive deeper into this if you want in the future. So what I like to do is create a collection, and so you can put a series of stacked maps, and it's best if they're at the same scale, so that as you walk around on the fire, it'll just automatically pop up, and then you're going to be collecting data in the same layer. So it's just an easier way to like keep your layers organized. So here's an example of, here's my folder, here's the collection, and here's the maps that are toggled on top of each other. So as I walked around this fire, then I could collect different notes for myself. I usually don't try not to collect a lot of data in Avenza, but I find myself taking a lot of notes out there for myself, just for like, hey, turn here, or, you know, different things like that. And then I do try to make a new layer for myself every day so that I'm exporting my layer every night in the read tent to keep track of the data that I do need to process. For instance, if it's an archaeological site assessment or something like that. So yeah, like I said, this is the best method that I found for myself, is using a collection of maps and then staying really organized with my layers, but you find whatever method works for you. And then just really quickly, you can import a KML file or KMZ into Avenza, and so that you were able to tap on these place marks and actually get some information. Like you can tap on it and then go to the description, and if you scroll down, you'll find the site number, but it's a lot harder to do that. Okay, we've got 10 minutes remaining. So I'm gonna just, this is actually in another presentation you can find, and this is actually kind of an old method that I used to use, but this shows you like, if you export your place marks as a shapefile, this is what the attribute table looks like. And I used to try to use the place mark name as the identifier for the JPEG to match up as like a photo log. Anyway, here we go. It just shows you, this is it's kind of complicated using Avenza. And then here's also another advanced use that you could use of having a schema and do all your assessments in here. But honestly, I think I prefer using a paper, just like one-page assessment, because there's various skills with Avenza, and you're gonna have, you know, a team of archaeologists, and I find it's better just to have the one-page assessment, so at least you have a baseline. Anyway, here's a plug for paper maps. They're full, because you know, when you're out on the fire line and you're trying to communicate with a tablet or phone on pointing at maps, is so much of our job of where we're trying to protect, or communicating different things through locations. So here's just an example of people pointing at maps, because I like to at least have one paper map of either my division or the whole fire when I'm out there so that I can communicate with division supervisors out there. And then I was just going to make a plug for the Resource Advisor Learning Library, which is hosted on the Wildland Fire Learning Portal. And it has a lot of great presentations. And if you go in there, you can search for the Resource Advisor Learning Library. And then within that, you can search for GIS. And Heidi Ogle and Mark Wasser have really great presentations. So I recommend looking at those to learn more about the things I just talked about. And then also the Cohort YouTube channel has past presentations. And then I did want to bring up this one. I really recommend looking at this presentation by Heidi Ogle because it goes through a demonstration of using field maps. And I feel like we don't have a lot of places for that. And it's something you kind of just have to play with to learn. But yeah, here's the learning library and different presentations that are available. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to stop talking.
Wow, Heidi, thank you. I mean, Molly, thank you. Sorry, heard Heidi's name too many times there in the last couple minutes, but thank you so much. And Theo, thank you as well. Again, I'm Pete, one of the co-managers of the cohort, as are Theo and Molly. And we're an all volunteer effort, and we appreciate the efforts of Molly and Theo in giving us an amazing presentation today. Folks, the chat is super active, and a bunch of you are answering, adding different resources that you find useful. That's super. I do want to highlight a comment that Brian put in there, and it speaks to a comment that Molly made about at least being aware that when you're using your own devices on incident, you're taking some risk, right? And Brian did a good job in the chat of sort of summarizing that. Folks, if you have a particular question that hasn't been addressed or a comment that you'd like to make in the few minutes we have remaining, I'd ask you to raise your hand and we'll try to recognize folks here. I do know that there are some changes coming to access to the NIFC FTP site. There's been, I saw a one pager the other day that there's going to be kind of a distinction between publicly available info that you can still get to without any kind of security protection, and then more sensitive stuff that's going to be behind a firewall. And it's moving to FAMOFF, if I'm remembering correctly. And I'm pretty sure somebody else can do a better job than me at summarizing that, but more of that's coming. More info on that is coming. Not seeing any hands at this point, folks, so I'll make a couple more comments. Again, thank you to Molly and Theo. This presentation will be up on the Read Cohort YouTube channel. And if Molly and Theo are willing, we can post each of their presentations also in the Cohort Google Drive library after this. I do want to point out that it's a super great topic. I've learned a lot. We got another great topic next month. It'll be on third Wednesday, as always, which in May is May 20th. Always starts at 8:30 Pacific time, and next month we'll learn more about soil pitting or chunking as a suppression repair technique, mostly for dozer lines. Goes by some other names too, but good topic coming up next month.
Pete,
And
I
I
see a
see the
question.
hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Arlene, I think.
Perfect. Go, Arlene.
Hi. I just had a quick question. Are you guys aware of any upcoming READ or ARC trainings that are happening that could be posted in the chat, perhaps?
I'll take a stab at that. So the big news, yeah, waffling's another name for soil pitting or chunking. Brian mentioned a sort of a reference document that'll be coming out soon that speaks more to M280, the new resource advisor training, which has replaced M9042. And one of the big changes there is that M280 Resource Advisor Fireline training is now the basic required training to become a REAF. And it is locally delivered, which means it's available for folks who are qualified REAFs to put on that 12-hour minimum course at a local level as opposed to being at a national level. So if folks know of them coming up, please do put it in the chat. I've heard of several of those being put on in different places across the country and more being planned. I'd encourage folks, if they're interested in that, to make sure that they got good contact with their home unit, host unit, fire training officers. So Maria, thanks for putting that M280 in Olympia, Washington coming up. Awesome.
I have a question.
Sure.
If I don't know if this is going to open a can of worms, but what you and Jen were talking about at the beginning, it was leading me to think, is there going to be like minimal resource advisors ordered? Is that what we're anticipating, or is Jen still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't think there's going to be minimal. I think it's going to be business as usual. It's just figuring out the details. If like I worked at parks where you have a fire program in your park, and they're all national park people and they support the resource advisors and the bear team. But if they get pulled into the Wildland Fire Service and they're no longer Park Service employees and they get relocated, how are we going to support the militia with PPE and those basics? So I think those are one of those details that we have to work out. But I think the resource advisor program is still strong, and it's going to be strong, and there's still always going to be a need for reads, especially, if we're looking at a suppression heavy program. So we're going to need reads to mitigate impacts. So I think we're going to need reads as much as we do now, if not more. And they'll be ordered up. It's just how in the future, it's just one of the things that we have to figure out. Are the resource advisors going to be supported?
Yeah, and this is Pete. The only thing I'll add is that from pre-call here a little over an hour ago, as Theo and Molly and I came on to make sure we could connect with each other through the call today, right? I think change and ongoing change has been a topic. Agency reorganization change of the Forest Service, the establishment within USDOI of the Wildland Fire Service, changes in REAF now being a full NWCG position, changes in the required training for REAF M280 instead of N9042. all kinds of changes, and just it speaks to the importance, I think, of our community here and sharing information about those changes. We may not have all the answers or all the certainty, but we try our best to share information, and we rely on each other to do that. Cool. I think both Molly and Theo's emails are in the chat at this point, and folks, you're welcome. I know that they welcome any follow up from y'all, and like I say, we will be posted up on the YouTube channel within a few days, not immediately, because there's only certain masters that have the magic to do that posting, and some of those are otherwise engaged this week. But also the presentations will get put up on the Resource Advisor Google Drive. That's the tiny URL that's also in the chat. We're at the bottom of the hour. I'd like to give both Theo and Molly a chance for closing comments. And Theo, to you first.
Sure. Thanks, Pete. Thanks everyone for the questions and conversation. Yeah, just keep up the good work, keep communicating, keep showing what's going on. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Theo. And Molly.
Yeah, same. It's good to see your face and be connected, like you're saying. So yeah, I hope to see y'all out on the fire season this year.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for participating in today's Resource Advisor Cohort call.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks to all that you do.